On today's episode of Road to Riches, we are taking a hard look at the recent expansion of the SALT deduction cap and what it means as a political tool as well as an economic statistic, and what the volatility of the US dollar means for you and your purchasing power, and where the dollar is going in the next few years. I am your host, Matthew White, with my co host, Nyamki Buchanan, and this is Road to Riches. Welcome back, everyone. As I said before, this is Road to Riches. Let's jump right in to the first article on our plate today. This one coming from the Wall Street Journal about the SALT pivot. So essentially, the Trump administration's olive branch to blue states. So if what this article is breaking down, if everybody will remember, back in 2017 the Trump administration passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or the TCJA, and as part of this bill, the SALT deduction, or the state and local tax deduction that you can take on your federal 1040, was capped at $10,000. And what the article is going over, however, is the shift in the Trump administration's stance on the SALT deduction. With the big beautiful bill that was passed earlier in 2025, that SALT deduction has quadrupled to 40,000. And so what the article is going through is just analyzing, why the change in opinion, why the change in policy. And so, if we really, we want to talk about this a little bit. So this represents, at face value, just looking at it immediately, what this represents is an olive branch from the Trump administration to high earning citizens or just middle class citizens in blue states, and saying, okay, I'm going to raise the state and local tax deduction for you guys because your state has higher income tax, they have higher property tax, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is, of course, an economic strategy, a political strategy as well from the Trump administration, to say that, hey, I'm trying to go after these citizens of blue states with the tools at my disposal, in this case, tax policy, and trying to get their support, trying to say, hey, I'm on your side. I'm trying to support you. It would be pretty cool if you supported me as well. But so, this is trying to neutralize a major talking point as well used by Democratic governors, which says that the tax problem is not necessarily their fault in terms of blue states. The tax burden is more so on Republicans. Even when you point out data that, hey, your tax rates are higher than all of the other Republican tax rates and everything like that, then these Democrat governors will come back at you with, right, but look at our fabricated education numbers. Look at for example, benefits and everything like that. And the conversation ends there, because you can't really argue false statistics with them. But that's another topic for another time. And so it kind of debunks that by Trump saying, okay, fine, I will give this deduction, and the people who use it, who choose to stay in your state, will actually be kind of a talking point for us, and saying, hey, these people are only in your state still because they're able to use the increased SALT deduction that I gave them. And so it will kind of flip the table around on them, saying that, okay, yeah, in spite of your higher taxes, I'm giving higher tax breaks to your taxpayers. In essence, trying to save your state. For example, like New York, a lot of people have left New York because of the high tax rates, and This is a situation where now the Trump administration can say, hey, I'm saving your own state from mass exodus because of your tax policy. And uh, and so, that's the good news. Now, what is the bad news? The bad news is uh, it's kind of it's kind of an argument against nature. And what I mean by that is the Trump administration is they're giving this tax deduction, but it's because of Democrat states and governors and municipalities doing the exact opposite of what Republicans stand for. And even though Trump is finding an olive branch and everything like that, and trying to like connect the divide between the two, he's also giving them an opportunity to say, hey, we haven't lost anybody. Well, you haven't lost anybody because of our tax deductions. uh, and he's kind of like fighting nature here. um, and now, is it a noble effort? I think that good intentions were meant here, but at the same time, there it is going to be tax money lost in the overall purse, and that tax money lost is going to be because people have to take these tax deductions in order to continue living in these socialistic hellholes, like New York, like California, where Democratic politicians and socialists have taken this stance that these ideas that have been debunked for hundreds of years can work. And it comes off like, honestly, to me, it comes off as the Trump administration rewarding this bad behavior a little bit. uh, Again, a little bit of a tangent, but that's my personal opinion on this matter. Nyamki, I don't know if you feel differently or not. Uh, yeah, let's go ahead and get your opinion on that. Whether or not you feel the same or differently about, what exactly is being meant by this. What exactly is meant by this salt increase, this salt deduction increase, and do we agree with it? Not, and what are the economic implications here?
Uh, on a large scale, I I do see your point, right? It is on some level this olive branch to the blue states to be able to say, well, hey, we're literally quadrupling the amount of taxes that your residents are able to deduct, those state and local taxes. And for the people living there, that is a good thing. Um, but at the end of the day, this this deduction was increased in the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill last year, right? So we knew that this was coming from the very beginning. We knew that people's tax returns were going to increase because of this, and of course, the article says, as well as just a little bit of common sense, will tell you that the high net worth individuals in those blue states are the ones that benefit the most from it. In states like California and New York, we're seeing some individuals' tax returns increase 15, 19, 21% in some of these states, right? Versus the some of the red states, a few of which, by the way, don't have state tax in the first place, which is a main reason why their tax returns are not increasing to the same amount. But in the ones that is increasing, those red states that are increasing, we're still seeing 5, 6, 7% of their tax returns increasing. So I'm not someone to say that the idea behind increasing this salt deduction for these state and local taxes was to be an olive branch to blue states, or rather the residents of blue states. I believe that this was something that was meant to go around to everyone, particularly uh, as most middle class and high net worth individuals are the ones that are going to take advantage of this the most. Um, that said, though, yes, because it does disproportionately affect or disproportionately benefit, I should say, those individuals in blue states. By the legal definition of disparate impact, then yes, this does count as quote unquote discrimination towards people in those red states, and is therefore, yes, I understand the argument that it's an olive branch to the people in blue states. Um, However, I'm not necessarily with you when you say that it's a bailout, so to speak, for those bad decisions. At the end of the day, people live where they live for a variety of reasons, and to say that this deduction is bailing out the bad decisions of a blue state such as New York, and the people in there are going to benefit directly because of it. Yes, while they are going to benefit, or some of them at least are going to benefit, by calling it a bailout of the blue states for their bad decisions, to me it feels and sounds almost as if you're trying to make those states a monolith, right? And saying that everyone in New York agrees with Mamdani, for example, and they want the high spending and the socialistic policies and things like that. They want the high tax rates. Um, it sounds like everyone in California votes Democrat and they agree with Gavin Newsom and things like that, which is, and it's simply not the case, right? There are plenty of people in those states that don't necessarily agree with these policies, but for whatever reason can't leave. I mean, for example, there are a lot of people that have parents that are older, need health care or personal care at home or what have you, and so they choose to be in a state where their parents are, even if they would otherwise want to be somewhere else. There are plenty of people who, because of their profession, for example, may need to be in one of the financial centers of the United States. And of course, the main one is still New York City, although others are rising. So for that reason, they may be somewhat confined to that area of New York, New Jersey, et cetera, right? And they're
Right.
dealing with these policies, even though they personally disagree with them or would like to be somewhere else. That's why I think, and not to completely go off on a political tangent, but that's why I think that it is very important that areas like Miami and Orlando in Florida, Dallas and Houston in Texas, to some degree, even Phoenix, Arizona, Charlotte, North Carolina, places like these are growing as financial and economic sectors or districts of the United States, because it does give people more opportunity. That said, I think that at some point we're going to need to get a larger financial district in the northern half of the country as well, that still has more uh, right leaning, conservative or even libertarian beliefs as well. So that way, people that enjoy the cold for whatever godforsaken reason, I don't know why you like that, but if you like snow for some reason, right, then now you can go and live in Montana or
Bismarck.
something. Yeah, yeah, you can go live in Bismarck, right? And you still have the opportunities to go be an investment banker or a hedge fund manager, whatever the hell you do, right? Whatever it is, if you want to start a restaurant out in some national park somewhere out in Montana, be my guest, right? That's what you want to do. Um, but I mean, yeah, to get back to the point of the story or the article, that is, we can talk all day about what the policy should be in these states, but the fact of the matter is that every level of government has to contend with every other level of government, right? So
Right.
New York City, they have to deal with New York State, and they have to deal with the federal government. Everyone has to do everything, and much like the three branches of government, they to some degree are a method of checks and balances, right? So
Right.
if the people in New York City say we don't like the policies, they can vote in a new mayor. The mayor can change some of the things, but they don't have as much reach as the state government would have. So they can vote in a new governor, and then if they don't like that, well, then now they've got to play nice with everybody else, and hopefully they can vote in a new president, new congressman, etc. With and because of that, we can't necessarily put the fault, I suppose, on one individual. We talk consistently about how President Trump is doing XYZ, about how President Trump is involved in ABC, right? And we even say, even at a lower level, we've done a few stories recently, over the last few weeks, and most of the time I was the one that brought him up to talk about in the first place, about Mamdani in New York City, and the policies that he's trying to enact, and some of the failures as well as some of the successes that he's had in his currently short stint as the mayor of New York City. And I think he's got another year and a half or something, I think. But back to the point, right? We talk about how these individual politicians are to blame or at fault for these situations, but they still have to contend with the other members of Congress. President Trump, he doesn't get, with the exception of executive orders. I'll say that, with the exception of executive orders, he doesn't get to do anything that doesn't go through both the House and the Senate.
Right.
Mamdani doesn't get to do uh, pretty much anything that doesn't go through the New York City Council, right? Um, uh, what's the governor's name in New York? I think it's Christy Nolan. And
Hochul.
Hochul, yeah, Kathy Hochul, that's right. She doesn't get to do anything, or just about anything. She doesn't get to do a whole lot if it doesn't go through the New York the New York House of Representatives, and that's the same with pretty much every state. So because of that, it's very important to be involved at all levels of government and vote for everyone. We normally see like anywhere between 2 and 5% of the state electorate will vote in a local election, or that is registered voters in an area, whether it's state, county, city, whatever, right? Anywhere from 2 to 5% of the electorate will vote in a local election. People really only turn out for the federal elections, and even then, there's still a lot of people that don't vote for those that are eligible, of course. So, uh, the again, the point is, not a single person is responsible for these. We can thank who we want. We can blame who we want. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, the people who are benefiting the most from things like this are going to be the ones that are diligent and smart with their saving, with their investing. They're going to be the ones that make a lot of money in the first place. Typically, are educated as well, um, things like that. So if you do want to be able to take advantage of these types of deductions, go out there and figure out how to make some more money, and then get yourself a decent accountant to legally get you the deductions that you're entitled to. Because I'm one of the people that say that there's not really any point in complaining about what other people are doing, or what other people benefit from, if I'm not willing to put the work in to do what they do or get where they are, right? So
Right.
I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, well, the rich people, they're getting a tax break, they get to write off all these different things. Well, if I can't, if, like Trump said, right? Back when he was running, and Hillary Clinton brought up how he basically didn't pay any taxes, right? And then he said, "Well, that makes me smart." At the end of the day, as if, no matter if you hate to hear it or not, that's a true statement. The less you pay in
Right.
taxes, generally, well, the more money you make, the less you pay in taxes, the smarter you are.
Right. And
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 essen-
I
and
I, I want to
essentially,
be
like,
smart.
and essentially, like, as he was saying when he said that, okay, but you've been in Congress for X amount of years, you and your party, you've done absolutely nothing to take these advantages away. Saying, I just use the tools available to me to minimize my tax burden. Pretend, he was essentially calling it, you pretend to care about the you pretend to care about the fact of my minimal tax burden, but but you have actually been in political power. Not only in political power, I mean, you've been a leader of the Democratic Party. You've been you've been a Democrat all your life. You've been able to amass support for things, and yet you and your party and your donors, which he mentioned, have done absolutely nothing to take away these tax loopholes, these legitimate tax loopholes for people like me to use. Why? Because you and all of your donors benefit from it, and that leads right into this next point that I wanted to bring up for people to kind of understand uh, about the deeper meaning behind the SALT deduction is this idea of incentive alignment. So when government comes in, and you're right, you're right, Nyanki, we don't just have one person to thank or blame for things. In this case, I will use quote unquote government to mean just people in power making things happen, and government will come in and make a decision. In this case, we're going to heighten the SALT deduction. And this represents a carrot. There's two things the government can do to influence behavior. They can offer carrots or they can offer sticks. Obviously, as the old adage suggests, carrot is something sweet that is offered, or at least something edible. I don't know if people actually think carrots are good. Uh, I'm sorry if you do; they're not. Uh, but and then of course a stick, you can just get beat with a stick. Nobody wants a stick. That represents punishment. Carrot represents food, and essentially a reward. So reward or punishment, and in this case government is using this SALT deduction. The one big beautiful bill is using the increase in SALT deduction as a carrot to individuals. You're right, not just in blue states, but everywhere. Maybe even to Democrats who live in red states, because of course, the the people who are already red in red states voted for Trump. So, um, uh, incentivizing, hey, we're trying to help you out. We're on your team, uh, and we're incentivizing you to help us. That's what's going on, beneath the surface here. Is they're extending an olive branch and saying, hey, we're on your team. We would like your support. Um, I'm not saying that there's anything bad about that at all. In fact, I think that that's a very good political strategy. It's been used for a long time, and I don't think there's anything immoral about something like that. Um, and so but then and I don't think we discussed it. The sunset warning for this SALT deduction for the one big beautiful bill. Uh, so this quote unquote relief is temporary. So this $40,000 cap is is set to sunset, or and expire in layman's terms, is set to sunset in 2029. In 2030 it's no longer in effect, and so it drops back down to that $10,000 cap. And so that brings up the point of, okay, well, is this actually a gift if it expires eventually, right? What? Uh, so now we're introduced with this principle of intertemporal choice, which means how do people decide what to do at different points in time when they know that a benefit is set to expire. What do they end up doing? Do they end up going with you while the in this case that would mean voting for you? Would they end up going with you and supporting you in your cause while the benefit is in effect, and then go back to their old ways when the benefit expires? And what happens there? And from using historical context, the answer to that question is yes. A lot of people will just take benefits, follow the crowd while the benefits are in effect, and then when the benefits expire, go back to their old ways, and vote how they used to, and whatnot. Uh, and so there's this idea of government, state, local, and federal, incentivizing certain behavior that it sees fit, um, by its own, using its own tools of, power of taxation, power of regulation, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we even see this in the EPA, for example, in a market that I'm very, very interested in, like automobiles, for example, where the EPA comes in and institutes, cafe standards, which are now prohibited by law, taken completely off of the books by the big beautiful bill. We used to have these cafe standards, and what they were, I believe, cafe is an acronym, but what it essentially was the EPA coming in and setting limits to gas consumption by cars, to try and limit, greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions, things like that. Increase regulation for, we used to just have the catalytic converter in cars. Now we have different sensors, different oxygen sensors in the exhaust and under the hood near the motor and the transmission, and all of that has to do with cafe standards. And all that is the government, by use of one of its executive arms, the EPA, um, incentivizing certain behaviors, like in this case, the climate agenda, uh, to incentivize behavior. Car makers putting these things in their car, and of course that was done away with, and in my opinion, rightfully so. Now customers don't have to, pay that much more for a vehicle, for these uh, things that don't add any actual value to the car itself. They don't have to pay any more money. For example, if one of those sensors goes off and they have a perpetual check engine light on, they don't have to pay money for that to be replaced because it's no longer required. And trust me, if it's no longer required, automakers simply won't put it in their cars because it costs them money as well. The cafe standards also had something to do with, um, uh, you know, regulating gas consumption, like I mentioned earlier, and taxing and literally fining uh, car production companies like Toyota, for example. This is a big reason why the TRD Pro, the Tacoma and the Tundra TRD Pro, don't come with off-road tires on them already, even though it's the highest sport and off-roading package for the Tundra and the Tacoma, is because of those cafe standards. They also have to have that, silly little windbreak, instead of the sporty, aggressive looking, um, skid plate. It is because of those standards. They have to meet certain requirements, and if they don't, then the vehicle is going to be so expensive that nobody can afford it. And it's already super expensive. If they made it any more expensive, nobody would buy it. And so, I've kind of rambled a little bit, but in short, this idea of the government offering incentives by using its powers to tax and regulate, is very real, and this is just another story illustrating that.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of things in there that I agree with. Since you did bring up the cafe standards, though, I want to continue to go in on just how bad of a thing that they are. A lot of people don't know this, but the cafe standards, as you said, Matt, um, because they are essentially limiting the amount of pollution that a vehicle can make, but it's also a function, right? So It's not. They're not just saying just flat out a vehicle of this class can only make this much. A vehicle of the next class can make this much, etc. For example, a regular passenger car versus a bus, and then an 18-wheeler, for example. That's not quite how it works. So it makes it a function based on the size of the vehicle. So a larger vehicle is allowed to pollute more. This is the only reason, this is the sole reason why trucks have nearly doubled in size over the last 60 years, why sedans are pretty much going away entirely in favor of crossovers and SUVs, and why we don't have very small vehicles like the Japanese K trucks at all. Because of these cafe standards being not actually eliminated, because the one big beautiful bill is just a budget bill, which means that it can only affect budgetary constraints, and the so the only part of the cafe standards that can actually change is the penalty for breaking this, which they lowered to zero. If they wanted to completely get rid of the cafe standard, then Congress would have to do that in a separate bill outside of a budget bill to actually get rid of the law itself. But again, because this is a temporary thing, a lot of people have been saying over and over and over again, "Oh, the cafe standards are going away. The penalties going to zero. We're going to get small vehicles again." And me with my forward thinking brain is just sitting over here saying, "No, I don't think that's going to happen for the simple reason that these standards are going to come back in 5 years unless Congress gets rid of them, or we then re up again, something like the one big beautiful bill, another spending bill, budget bill, in which we continue to keep the penalty at zero." Speaking having a time constraint on these things, the salt the salt deduction is also limited until I believe 2029, or it's raised until 2029. At which point it'll have to be voted on again, or Congress will otherwise have to go and pass it in a law entirely. Um, that said, back to the cafe standard thing, because there is time needed to research, develop, and manufacture these vehicles. There might be one single year where a company is able to sell a vehicle that they produced that that knowingly goes outside of these cafe standards. The only other way to do it is if they basically just do in some sort of engine swap. Say, "Oh well, let's take Toy no yeah let's take Toyota for example, right?" So Toyota says, "You know what? We're just gonna drop a Tundra engine in a Camry." Technically, they can do that, and it would, of course, break the cafe standards, and that'd be okay. But first, there's a market research side of things. Who is really going to buy a Camry with a Tundra engine in it? Who is it for? Is it even a good product? Assuming all of those things do work out, how many of them can they actually produce? Because there's only so many of those Tundra engines they can make in a year, right? I mean, there's all these things to think about from a business standpoint that to me means that until they permanently lower this penalty to zero, or just get rid of it entirely, we are extremely unlikely to see a true vehicle that needs the cafe standards to go away. And I mean, let's be honest anyway, with the popularity of EVs and hybrids and other long range cars, long distance cars that get great gas mileage, I think it's going to be, I just think the overall market for something like that at this point in time is pretty low. Maybe if we keep these standards lower and some company decides to go out on a limb and get back to like standard American muscle car type stuff, right? Loud engines, big exhaust, low gas mileage, but just full on aggression, right? Give it another 10, 15 years of that being sold, and then we might have a good market for this. But again, 5, 6 years, I don't really think it's going to happen. Um,
Well, I
but
I just hate the Turbo 4. The four cylinder turbo is BS, and I stand by that. I think that it produces as much horsepower as it produces as much horsepower as much horsepower and torque as a low powered V6 does, and it's BS. And I wish they would stop. And one of the reasons why they have to do that is because of EPA standards, because it produces a little bit better gas mileage and it doesn't consume as much. But and but I'm a car guy, so like do with that what you will. Uh, I want my V6s back in my on and honestly, when you talked about that Tundra engine in the Camry, I was like, I don't know, that would be pretty sweet.
I
um,
mean, it
but
would. Don't get me wrong. Like if it was up to me, we'd be like getting Duramax engines and the Hemis and putting them in everything. But that's not what these companies are doing anymore.
no, no.
I mean,
And
okay. Real talk. Just real quick. I got to say this. Imagine for a second, right? We bring back the Ford Pinto, that horrible car that no one liked. But instead of it being a regular Ford Pinto, Cadillac just drops a Blackwing engine in it.
that would people would die.
Ultimate sleeper, bro. Okay.
People, but
I just think that we should like raise Pontiac from the dead and bring back the Firebird. That's how I feel, but
oh yeah.
that's never gonna
Well,
happen, unfortunately.
but on a more serious note, right? So so this what these cafe standards have done, especially for the performance market of these cars. So I'm a Cadillac guy. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a Cadillac fanboy, and so they sell, of course, like you mentioned, the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing. This four-door sedan with a 6.2 liter supercharged V8 in it, and produces 668 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. It's a monster, right? But it's also $120,000 brand new. And I've seen those prices come down to 85,000 with lightly used, so meaning 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 miles on them. But then they don't just sell the Blackwing. They also sell, speaking of the full size sedan, which is the CT5, they also sell the CT5V, the regular V, not the Blackwing. And because of these cafe standards, that Cadillac can't just put a V8 in it. They can't do that. What Cadillac is trying to do with this car is try to introduce a less expensive way to get into the V sector of their market, which is Cadillac's racing branch. And what's actually under the hood of this car is just a twin turbo V6, a 3-liter V6. It's not even a 3.6 or 3.7 or anything like that. It's just a 3-liter V6. And I believe it's V. It's not a straight six or anything. And in real terms, I mean, and Toyota has to do the same thing with their TRD Pro Camry. They can't put V8s in these cars because they would immediately become so expensive, because they would immediately become so expensive for the automaker to make, not necessarily because it's expensive to produce these parts. I mean, it is, but because they're now being fined and regulated by the EPA because V8s obviously produce way more pollution, and produce way more carbon dioxide and all that stuff. And so that's been a little bit of a bone that I have to pick with it. It would be sick if the CT5V had a V8 in it, because it's kind of weird going from a 3-liter V6, twin turbo or not, and then the next step is a supercharged V8. it, neither here nor there, but it has had real repercussions. You mentioned trucks. It even has repercussions there as far as, trucks like the AT4 and the AT4X from GMC and the Chevrolet High Country being, $100,000, trucks. And you're like, what the heck? And that kind of has a lot to do with regulation. Not all of it. I'm not going to put all the blame on the EPA, but it does have something to do with it. But moving on, because I assume we're getting low on time, and we really need to talk about this next story. This one from CNBC. So here we talk about the U.S. dollar having potentially more room to fall, as a decline kind of creates a double-edged sword for America. And what the article goes over is essentially this idea that for decades the U.S. dollar was the ultimate safety net for global investors. However, this week it's underwent a sharp sell-off, and market veterans are now asking, are we witnessing the end of the American mania and the start of a multi-year bear market for the greenback? Meaning, are we experiencing a dollar sell-off? And so essentially what the article goes over is, there's been a little bit of a psychological shift in the market. So this phenomenon that first appeared after Liberation Day, quote unquote, in April of 2025, when we instituted all these tariffs against all of our trading partners around the world, we experience this strength in the U.S. dollar, because now all of a sudden imports are all of a sudden exports are more expensive, and so our trading partners are having to spend more money on our exports, their imports, and the U.S. dollar is being traded a lot more. Demand for the U.S. dollar, in short, is going up. So therefore, the price is staying the same. And by the way, the supply of the U.S. dollar is remaining constant. And so, putting it in simple economic terms like that, supply stays constant. What happens when demand rises even a little bit? Well, the price will ultimately follow, given enough time. Often in the short run, price does indeed follow. And so, what we're experiencing now is geopolitical friction, especially with our quote unquote friends in NATO, and of course this idea that the United States is going to go annex Greenland, and but what we're seeing now is people are starting to sell off the dollar, and they're starting to sell off the dollar largely because, and it could be for several reasons, the United States is not exporting as much, or the United States is experiencing economic troubles of its own and therefore cannot export as much. But either way, the U.S. dollar index went down by 1.3%, which on January 29th alone, which was its sharpest drop in nearly a year. So year over year, sharpest drop, which is a big deal. 1.3% in one day is quite a lot. And so we get this idea on what exactly are the implications behind this, and how are we going to deal with the idea of the dollar not being as strong going into the future. And with the one big beautiful bill, we talked about the increase in SALT deduction. We haven't talked about, but we have inferred that and acknowledged the fact that there are other increasing tax breaks with the one big beautiful bill. This idea of tax rates going down, and so people are now asking, well, now the government is getting less revenue. Well, what does that mean for the dollar? more dollars are now in the market than before, assuming, of course, that this now debunked theory that the exact same amount of taxpayers are going to stay in the tax base or stay in their individual tax bracket, despite increased tax benefits. And so people are asking the question, well, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about, benefits getting less money now because of the decrease in tax rates? And now, as the United States is starting to lean into this isolationist trade policy. Global investors, not just national but global investors, are starting to ask, maybe maybe it's best right now to swap dollars for commodities like gold and silver, commodities that are ultimately, not necessarily tied to the dollar or the Federal Reserve, but have historically kept up with inflation, and and have allowed room for the dollar to depreciate, because they simply gain in value. And so this is an interesting situation. Again, uh, I mentioned this idea that, people are getting a little bit freaked out, especially after this drop, and especially after the tax bill that was passed, and as people are starting to pay their taxes and tax days coming up, this idea that, the United States, this idea of the Laffer curve, again, that the United States has not reached the point on the Laffer curve where, tax revenues decrease, that there is no more decrease in the tax rates that we can make that can increase overall tax revenues. Um, Again, the Laffer curve is not necessarily a new economic principle, but people continue to misunderstand the whole point. And I mean, on the other side of the argument, from what I just mentioned, and the CNBC article just mentioned, on the other side of that argument is, well, we did see in 2017, when everybody was making the same argument about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Well, they were making the same argument that, oh, well, the government's going to lose revenue and it's actually going to be bad because we're not going to have enough money for these incentive programs, for these Social Security and safety net programs. Well, the exact opposite happened when the government actually ended up with higher tax revenues. And that has everything to do with the principle of the Laffer curve. The United States clearly was not at that time, and I believe still isn't, at the point of decreasing, um, tax rates and tax benefits, and not increasing the overall tax revenue. I believe that, this idea that, that people will begin to invest more of their money if they know that they're not just going to be immediately taxed on it, or taxed at such a high rate that they no longer make any return, on their money. I still believe that we're not at that we're not at the place yet where we can lower tax benefits, and that will lower overall tax revenue. And uh, and so, in short, I disagree with the sentiments that the CNBC article is trying to convey, and because it was wrong back in 2017. I'm old enough to remember when they made this same argument in 2017, and it just wasn't true then. I don't believe it's true now. And so, we'll see, because more and more people are starting to pay their taxes, as tax day rapidly approaches. Of course, April 15th. If you're a young person, you should commit that date to memory. Otherwise, it's possible the IRS will come after you. But um, you know, we'll see going forward. We'll see what the data says. But like I said, in short, I disagree with that sentiment. I do think that the US dollar decline is something to pay attention to. Um, However, it seems like the CNBC article is also uh, thinking about suggesting that we lower our tariff rates against these other countries, and something a lot of people don't know about the underlying reasons behind these tariffs is it wasn't free trade at all. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, an organization that actually has a lot of the same countries that are in NATO in it, including the United States and its European allies. Uh, so we the tariff rates between us were nowhere near the same. The United States had this agreement, and this is dating all the way back to when the Soviet Union was still alive, saying, okay, because we're the United States, because we're the most powerful and richest country in the world, we are going to give you guys the benefit of paying a lower tariff rate, and we will pay a higher tariff rate. We will engage in unequal trade with you if you don't side with those dirty communists. And even after and NATO, by the way, just on a tangent, NATO, by the way, was created for the same reason, except on a political level, not necessarily on an economic level, saying, okay, come be with us, and we'll protect each other, we'll pay for each other's military, the United States will protect you and benefit you if you stay away from those dirty communists. Well, the WTO is the trade part of that, saying we will engage in unequal trade willingly if you stay away from the communists. And we'll sing kumbaya and watch the Soviet Union die, which it eventually did. Well, the Soviet Union's gone. So why are we still getting screwed on trade? And why are we still getting screwed on military protection in NATO? And again, tangent, but it has a real impact on the value of the dollar. And it has a real impact on the value of the dollar, has a real impact on trade policy. And this idea that we just roll back, this idea that we just roll back trade protections for the United States because the dollar has a bad day or what have you. In my opinion, that's not going to solve your problem. You're just going to go back to a problem we had in the past. And by the way, they're not. Let's not pretend like it's reciprocal trade now, even with these heightened tariff rates, because it's not. In fact, all Liberation Day did was increase tariff rates on these other countries to half of what they charge us. And then Supreme Court comes out and says, okay, maybe you can't do that. And everybody was up in arms when the president said, okay, well, I'm going to institute these other tools at my disposal, these other laws, to do tariffs that way. And in fact, I'm going to increase them now. And in my opinion, completely fair economic policy. I think that fair trade is a beneficial idea for the entire world, and I don't think that countries should be benefiting off of the prosperity of the United States. And on the other side of that, I don't think that the United States should punish its own citizens simply for being wealthy. Um, uh, Again, obviously a topic I'm very passionate about. Nyanki, what are your thoughts on this idea of the dollar kind of slowing down and in some cases taking a little bit of a hit on in the overall market, and how that pertains to the things that have affected it, like tariffs and like the tax situation with the one big beautiful bill?
Yeah, I mean, I'm firstly, I'm gonna be quick with this because I know we've got about 5 minutes left until we're on the hour, but you know, I take a lot more cynical approach than you. I don't like at all that the dollar is being devalued. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot that goes into the value of the dollar. You mentioned a few things, such NATO with our defense spending. Also, the value of the petrodollar, which is uh, overall basically how much we control the global oil trade. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But the thing that I don't like the most is that by being in a good position, um, with having the tariffs and with our dollar going up and being more valuable, well, we by doing things like that, we inherently created the problem that we would eventually get to a devaluation of the dollar once other countries did to some degree figure out how to stop relying on us. And granted, most of this is actually happening right now because of the war in Iran and things like that. So that, I mean, it's not directly correlated, but it's um, still relevant, uh, at the about the tariffs and global trade, etc. But again, to get back to my cynical approach on this, I don't like that the dollar is losing value because I'm on the side of the American. Um, we we just buy a lot of stuff from outside the country, plain and simple. There's pretty much no way to get around that. So for me to see that our federal leadership is happy that our dollar is being devalued, saying things such as we're going to make more money. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Sure, we're going to bring in more revenue to the country because as our dollar is weaker, that means the value of our exports for other countries has gone down, so the Japanese can buy more American products with the same amount of yen, right? The Chinese can buy more products with the same amount of yen. England can buy more American products with the same amount of the pound that they have, right? The British pound. So to me, this is a problem because number one, I don't want my physical resources going to other countries and being exported. Um, on one hand, there is a little bit of a benefit, which means that if we are exporting more things, well, then our manufacturing base is going to get stronger, which means more Americans can get jobs here in this country. But we also have a problem with immigration, so that's not really happening at this point. Um, that said, overall, the overall issue that I have with this is that if we're going to say that we're looking to the future as a country, then we have to maintain a strong dollar because a strong dollar means that the value of our labor, the value of our products, the value of America is high relative to other countries. We want to be the place that businesses, or excuse me, that countries want to do business with because we make the best products and we have the best people. And a strong dollar shows that that is more so the case. We want to be the country that other people want to come to and want to work in and want to live in, um, because we have opportunity. We
Right.
have the best products. We have the best industries. We have the best education. That's what I want for our country. And this situation is showing that right now it's the opposite. So I can only hope that things will improve in the future. And whether it's with this administration or the next administration, we get back to a point not of making America great again, not of America first, but of America only. Because our politicians are supposed to look out for us. They're supposed
Right.
to look out for our country. We need to be their focus, not Mexico, not Venezuela, not Cuba, not Israel, not Iran, not Ukraine, America.
Right.
Because you swore an allegiance to this country, not some other country. That's what I want to see in the future. So, with all that said, that wraps up another episode. We hope that today's breakdown gives you a clearer picture of our current macroeconomic landscape. A huge thank you for tuning in and learning with us. Uh, I'm Niamki Buchanan. My co-host is Matt White. Um, as we navigate these massive financial policy shifts, um, we hope that you found value in our discussion and things that you heard today with regards to the salt taxes and how they're changing, as well as the quote unquote sell America trade that we briefly talked about at the end here with the decreasing value of the dollar. Um, Make sure to please subscribe to the podcast and like the video if you did get value from it. New episodes come out every Thursday, and we hope to see you next time on The Road to Riches. Thank you.